Hello everyone, welcome to the class of Railway Engineering. So in the last lecture we have studied about creep in rails, okay, which was basically what the movement of the rail along the longitudinal direction, okay. So in earlier lecture we have studied about the rail defects as well, okay. So now today's lecture will be on rail failure, but now I want you to know that rail defects and rail failures are both different things, okay. How they are different? There's a slight difference between rail defects and rail failure. Rail defects is actually uh, a range of series of defects, okay, which arises in it may be in the surface, it may be in the web of the rail flange or in the foot of the rail, okay. But they may or may not be responsible for the this thing maintenance team to replace the entire rail. But in case of rail failures, whenever instead of rail defects, whenever rail failures are there, the entire rail track has to be replaced. There is no other option like maintaining it or repairing it. So whenever the defect is beyond the rail, this thing, where the defect is beyond the repair system, then it is also known as rail failure. So what causes these rail failures basically? So the very first this thing reason for these rail failures is the inherent defects in the rail itself. Okay, so any rail might have uh, inbuilt a defect itself while manufacturing. Okay, so these defects include chemical composition, piping, seams, laps, etc. Okay, then there is defects due to the fault of the rolling stock. Okay, since we know that the wheels of the rolling stock, that is the locomotives and the wagons, they run on what? The rail surface. They are in direct contact with the rail surface. So whenever if there is a case where there is any fault in the rolling stock, the fault will obviously affect and cause rail failures. Okay, these rail failures which are caused due to the fault of the rolling stocks, these are known as these are listed out as flat spots, engine burns, skidding of wheels, okay. Then severe braking. Okay, these are all the defects which falls under the category of the rail failures, which are caused due to what? Due to the fault in the rolling stock. Okay, then comes your excessive corrosion of rails. This may arise due to extreme weather conditions, or else since the rails are resting on a formation which is ultimately soil condition itself. So the soil moisture condition may also affect the excessive corrosion of the rails. Like for example, suburban railways in Mumbai. Okay, every year we have a problem of water logging over there. Okay, in spite of so good drainage facilities which are provided, then also there are what? The water logging problem is still prevailing. So what happens is, plus moreover, the water over there is salty in nature. Okay, saline water is there. So this all those reasons causes what? The extreme weather conditions plus extreme this thing moisture condition from the soil itself. Okay, so even after the water logging has moved out, so even after that, what happens? जो भी तुम्हारे आपके rails वहां पर हैं, that will be exposed to moisture itself. So they will be ultimately corroded. Okay, then one of the causes of rail failures is badly maintained joints. See, the entire rail is having a uniform material. So the only place where the materials, this thing, when there is a deviation in the material or the deviation in the uniformity of rails, is the joint itself. So either it is a welded joint or it is this thing, a joint by using fish plates. Okay, both the joints are equally exposed to the certain conditions. Okay, and in both the cases, if those joints are badly maintained, in both the cases maintenance is actually required. Okay, plus in that the joints which are used which are made by using this fish plates and fish poles, उन joints में क्या होता है, ज़्यादा maintenance required होता है. ठीक है, so if this maintenance is not carried out properly, the improper packing and loose fitting is left out over there. So these joints will cause ultimately rail failures even in the new tracks as well. Okay, then in case of welded joint, if there is a defect in welding of the joint, okay, improper composition of weld metal is used or defective procedure is adopted. So all these things causes defects in the welding of the joint and thereby rail failure. Then again the same thing, improper maintenance of the track. If the maintenance is not done timely, okay, or ineffectively it is completed. Like in some places, there might be possibility the team hasn't worked so good. So in that case, the ineffectiveness of the maintenance track will be there. And similarly, if the rails are not maintained timely, that also causes what? Improper maintenance of tracks and therefore the rail failure. Then the last cause for rail failures is derailment. Suppose if a train is derailment is actually what? कोई भी train अगर अपने track से ड्यू टू सर्टेन रीजंस, ड्यू टू एन नंबर ऑफ कॉजेज अगर नीचे रेल ट्रैक से अलग हट जाती है, दैट मीन्स द अलाइनमेंट गोज द ट्रेन, द व्हील्स ऑफ द ट्रेन आर ऑफ फ्रॉम द ट्रैक, ओके. दैट कंडीशन जरूरी नहीं है कि प्रॉपर बहुत बड़ा एक्सीडेंट हो. इवन इफ द व्हील्स ऑफ द लोकोमोटिव और व्हील्स ऑफ द वैगन आर नॉट इन द प्लेस दे आर मेंट टू बी, दैट इज ट्रैक के ऊपर नहीं है, वहां से अलग हट गया, ठीक है. तो ट्रैक से नीचे अगर एक बार ट्रेन के व्हील्स उतर गए, दैट मीन्स द डिरेलमेंट हैज बीन देयर. डिरेलमेंट मीन्स रेल से हट जाना, ओके. सो दैट कंडीशन इन केस अगर ट्रेन रेल ट्रैक से अलग हट जाती है, ठीक है, so that also causes, since it is running at a good speed, even if it is running at a small speed, जहाँ से नीचे उतरेगी ट्रेन, at that place it will cause what? It will cause the rail to be defected. Okay. Then comes your next thing, that is classification of the rail failure. Now these rail failures, there is a technique to classify these rail failures, okay. So these Indian Railways classifies these rail failures using certain codes, which these codes are made up of two major portions, okay. So these two portions, out of these two portions, we'll first discuss the first portion first, okay. So this first portion, it consists of three code letters, okay. These three code letters define certain different things. Those three things which these code letters define are the type of rail used, the reason of withdrawal, and the probable cause, okay. So this uh, constitute what? This first, these three codes constitute the first portion of the this thing, rail failure code, which is designated by Indian Railways, okay. So these codes are designated based on certain things like type of rails. The very first code which represents type of rail. For plain rails we use O. For points and crossing we use X. Then for reason, when it comes to reason of withdrawal, for fractured rail we use F. Then for cracked rails we use C, and for completely defective rail we use D. Then in order to show the probable cause, R stands for inherent defects in rail, S stands for faulting of rolling stock, all the defects which we have studied in the previous slide, okay. Then C stands for excessive corrosion, J stands for badly maintained joint, M stands for other maintenance conditions, D stands for derailment, etc., etc., okay. So these are the three things which constitutes the first portion. Now for example, for example, if the first portion of the rail failures, it denotes what? The code is given as, the three letter code is OFD. Oh, sorry, OFR. Okay, so this stands for what? This stands for the plain defect. Okay, reason for the withdrawal is fractured. Then the probable cause for this failure is R, that is inherent defect in the rail itself. Okay, so this is how the first portion is designated. Then comes the second portion. The second portion is actually made up of 3 to 4 digits, which defines the location along the length, okay. Then position of origin in the rail length, okay. Then direction of propagation of the failure which arises, and lastly any other information which is required. This is the fourth this thing denomination which is used, okay. So there are certain codings which are already designated, pre-designated codings. Like for example, one stands for within fish plate, so it denotes the location of the rail failure within the fish plate itself. Then position of the origin in the length. If in this case O stands for unknown, one stands for within the rail head. Okay, so like this, the various codes are designated for various abbreviations. Okay. So the entire code which signifies or which defines or which classifies the rail failures in Indian Railways, according to Indian Railways, is actually made up of 7 digits, okay, or 7 letters, in which the first portion is made up of first 3 letters, then second portion is made up of the last 4 letters, okay, which represent each of the letters represent different parameters or different this thing coding, okay. Now, based apart from that particular classification, the rail play failures are classified based on certain categories. Okay, so based on the description of the fracture, the rail categories are designated as A, B, C, D, E up to H, I, J, K, and so on. Okay. So, for example, A stands for example, if the fracture, the cracks are there in the head of the rail, it is considered to be A category defect or A category failures. Why A category failures? Because head is the most important part of the rail. And if you are having cracks in the head of the rail, that means it is a severe category defect. Then B category stands for solitary cracks in the web or flange of the rail. C category stands for transverse, that is parallel to the rail cross section cracks. D stands for horizontal cracks in the web. E stands for pieces of head, web, and flange broken off the rail end. F stands for portion of rail broken off. G stands for breaks through section of rail. Similarly, if the fracture or the cracks and breaks, uh, there are cracks and breaks through the weld, then it falls under H category. And like in the same way, if the portion are absent from the railhead, that means a certain amount of material has been removed from the railhead, it falls under J category. Similarly, K stands for the piece of rail broken away through web and head flange. Okay, so here are some pictures which shows the categories of rail failures which we have discussed right now in the previous slide. Okay, so category A looks like this. See the very first image. In the first image, the left hand side image, it shows vertical crack through the crown at rail end. Okay, like this. At the start of the rail, you can see this crack which is propagating throughout the head from the rail end. Second is vertical crack on the running face of the rail. This is not on the thing end or the start of the rail, but in the running face of the rail itself. But the nature of the crack is same, that is vertical crack. Then the third figure shows the third images of horizontal crack on the side of the rail head at end. Okay, so again the location is at the end. The crack is horizontal in nature. Then fourth image is again the nature of the crack is horizontal, but this is on the side of the rail head. Okay, this these particular figures shows category B defects. The first one shows crack at the junction of head and web over here. The second one, the crack in the body of the web. Here you can see in the flange of the rail there is a crack propagating. In the third image, the crack is at the junction of flange and web. Okay, over here. It is a bit blurry, but you can see easily the place where this fillet is required. Okay, so this large radii of fillet where we provide over there at the junction of flange and web, there is a crack propagating. Then the crack in flange. Here in the last image, the crack is in flange completely. Okay, next category is C category. The C category denotes what? See in the first image, again C1, C2, C3, C4, and C5 like this. The rail failures are coded. This one stands for what? The location. Okay. So this is again C category defect. So the first image shows transverse crack at the bond. Second image, it shows transverse crack at the flange over here. Third image shows vertical crack at the end. Over here at the end, it is not that clearly visible because it is at the end in the flange itself. Oh, sorry, web itself. Okay. The fourth image shows transverse crack at the rail end, rail head. The last image shows transverse crack at the bond itself. This is an image of D category rail failures. Okay, so the first image is depicting what the crack in web at the end over here. Okay, then the last image is crack in web along the holes. These are the holes where fish plates are provided. जहाँ पर हम लोग fish plates place करके और उसको fish bolts use करके हम लोग क्या करते हैं, दो rails को join करते हैं. These are the holes which are used. These are also known as fish holes. Okay, so crack in the web along the fish holes is also designated as category D defect. Then category E defect is completely broken rail. Okay, so over here there are certain images which are several images which are showing certain portion of the rail broken. Okay, so partially broken rails are considered under E category defect. See, like over here, the foot of the rail is broken. Okay, then in the second and third image, the flange is broken and the as well as the head is also broken. In the last two images, the flange is intact, the foot of the rail is intact, but the head of the rails, the material has been removed from the head of the rail. Okay, so all these defects fall under failures fall under F category, E category. The next is F category failures. This F category failures is again broken rail, but the difference between E and F category is the amount of rail which is broken. So it can be clearly seen as compared to the E category failure. F category failure denotes broken rail again, but the amount of the rail which are the portion of the rail which has broken is too large. Okay. G category rail failures denotes complete disintegration of the rail portion. Okay, so instead of partially broken rails over here, we will be having completely broken rails which are broken into certain two parts. Okay, two or more than two parts. Then comes here one more thing, that is rail damages. Apart from these rail failures, certain rail damages are there. For example, these are the most commonly arising rail damages, which are horizontal split head, which are caused due to the rolling stock, and split web, which are caused due to excessive loading of the rails, which are not basically as per the recommendation. Then there are vertical split heads. Again, over here you can see in the second image. The first image shows transverse defects. These transverse defects basically, the common reasons for these transverse defects are either inherent defects in the rails or certain weathering action. Okay, over here the first image shows the head or web separation, and the second image shows again the crushed head. See, split head and crushed head are, you can see quite similar in nature, but there's a difference in the amount of the split or amount of the crushing which takes place. Okay, then here are images of broken base and flaking which arises. See, even if flaking is there, the rail is considered to be this thing damaged. Okay, so it has to be replaced. Okay, this is one defect, that is pipe rail. In the first slide you have seen this term pipe rail. So piping of the rail is like this. The cross section you can see over here, that is the piping arises when the flange has split internally. Okay, so under basically the flange has become hollow. Okay, so this also arises due to excessive loading ki buckling ho jati hai flange ki, and due to certain inherent defects in the material itself, what happens ki instead of showing the defect from the outer side, this will be buckled, and a hollow passage will be created in the flange. Therefore, it is known as piped rail. Okay. Then bolt hole cracks. Again, the fish holes where the fish plates are placed, the cracks can propagate. Okay. So these were all the defects which basically arises in the rail tracks. Okay. So for these particular topics, you can refer the following readings. Thank you very much. We shall be meeting in the next lecture.